So I thought, because I'm interested in breast cancer, I thought I will trace my journey through the management of breast cancer. Since 4 decades, I've been dealing with breast cancer. I thought this is a wonderful opportunity for me to share my experience. Next slide. So my journey started in 1976 in the cancer chemo ward in Madras Medical College. This is the place where I did MD General Medicine. And Dr. Subramaniam had just come back from Royal Marsden, and he started the cancer chemotherapy ward attached to the Department of Medicine. I was the first year PG at that time, and I was posted with him. So for 4 months, I had to be with him. And we saw only advanced cancer patients. We had only endoxan and methotrexate and capsule 5-FU. So all the breast cancer patients used to receive that only. Next. Next slide. Next slide. So the wave of CMF started at that time. Next slide. So CMF, as all you know, was tested in 1970s by the Bonadonna et al. Group and the Milan group. Risk reduction for recurrence with the addition of adjuvant CT paved the way for the development of surgical procedures less morbid than those pioneered by Halsted. Next. So the paradigm shift happened from CMF to anthracycline, and the anthracycline era began. Next. So the start of chemotherapy, the major shift happened when the anthracyclines came. The Milan group was the first to describe the use of anthracycline in metastatic breast cancer, and the first anthracycline containing adjuvant regimen to become gold standard was doxorubicin and cyclophosphamide, investigated initially by NSABP in 1990s by Fisher et al. Next. So an alternative to the substitution of methotrexate was the addition of an anthracycline to CMF in what is known as a block sequential design. And in the national epirubicin adjuvant trial, 4 cycles of epirubicin were followed by 4 cycles of CMF, resulting in significantly improved efficacy compared with 6 cycles of CMF alone. Next. So we all know that definitely anthracycline was much better than the standard CMF at that point of time. Next. Next slide. So then my journey started in 1981 as a lecturer in medical oncology, and Dr. Krishna Bhargava, I wanted to say at this point of time, who changed my life. Actually, I had just married and I had come to Bangalore, and at that point, my husband had applied for this post without my knowledge. So when the application form reached Kidwai 1 day later, but still Dr. Bhargava, somehow he called me and told me that I should come for the interview, and that is how my whole life was changed towards oncology. At that point of time, I got DM cardiology seat in Madras Medical College, but since my mother was against, she said, after marriage, you're not coming back to Chennai, so you have to join as a lecturer in medical oncology. So my whole life changed as an oncologist. So at that point of time, we had only advanced breast cancer. We used to use only CMF, which was a standard of care, and doxorubicin we could use for few patients. At that time, pharmacia was there, and we used to get some doxorubicin to use for the patients. Next. Next came after the anthracycline, a real paradigm shift is taxanes. The taxanes came and changed quite a lot in the management of breast cancer. Next. So this, if you look at all this immunotherapy and all, they were all incremental benefit. But whereas anthracyclines and taxane really made a paradigm shift. So in 1970s, the first new cytotoxic drugs for several decades with activity in metastatic breast cancer, and paclitaxel or docetaxel in various adjuvant chemotherapy trial regimens, and in United States, AC followed by paclitaxel in a block sequential design was shown to be more effective than AC alone. Next. Then there was an accelerated approach every 2 weeks, an adaptation made possible through the use of GCSF, which helped to prevent chemotherapy-associated neutropenia. The accelerated approach resulted in further increment in anti-tumor activity. Next. So if you can see, and this graph, which says how the cancer chemotherapy developed for breast cancer, the gain from no chemotherapy to CMF to anthracyclines and taxane, definitely taxanes and anthracycline did make a great paradigm shift. Next. Then came from the paclitaxel to docetaxel, major development breast cancer international research group trial looked at FAC and was replaced by, 5FU was replaced by Taxotere, that is docetaxel. TAC provided a significant improvement in efficacy compared with FAC. The French adjuvant group modified FEC into a sequential regimen, FEC followed by docetaxel. Then FEC-T became commonly used regimen following surgery for axillary lymph node positive breast cancer in UK. Next. In 1985, again there was a major change in mind. I joined the Cancer Institute to do my DM. My mother was there. She was very angry with me because I had a very small child at that point of time. I learned a basic thing. What I learned in Cancer Institute was, the basic thing was called meticulous management and recording. The recording was superb. Till then, I never knew that we have to record very well like that. Dr. Shantas and Dr. Krishnamurthy were very particular that everything has to be recorded, and that is where I learned methodical recording and entry into the case sheets. And another important thing was that they had a very nice registry where from 1952 all case records could be retrieved, because they used to file under the diagnosis. So lymphoma 1950, we can take the case record. Such beautiful registry, and even today the best registry in India is the Tamil Nadu registry, because they have now mapped the whole Tamil Nadu and the results are coming out shortly. Next. This is my, after DM, our send-off with Dr. Shanta and Dr. Krishnamurthy. All 6 of us took together because it was a block, 2 years students were together who took the exam. So 1987 was our send-off from Cancer Institute, Adyar. Next. Then came the wave of hormone therapy. This also has really made a change in the paradigm shift. Next. So we all know tamoxifen, a rather accidental discovery, then was made by the scientists working for AstraZeneca now, who had been tasked to find a new emergency contraceptive. Okay. Next. So the key players in this were a group of cancer research UK funded scientists and clinicians called the EBCTCG, set up in 1983 in Oxford. By 1988, they collated the results of 28 tamoxifen trials and 16,000 participants from across the world. So meta-analysis did an overall analysis of all the data of the trials were published in NEJM. Next. Then came the wave of aromatase inhibitors. This also really made a great paradigm shift in the management of breast cancer. Next. So as you all know, the development of aromatase inhibitors from first generation to second generation to third generation, the potency improved, the specificity improved, and the toxicity was less. Next. And you can see the timeline of development of agents in breast cancer. So tamoxifen, which was there in 1970, then came the aromatase inhibitors in 1995 to 1997, and then fulvestrant came in 2010, and then in 2012, everolimus came. Next. So my journey in the development of aromatase inhibitor was, I was a part of this clinical trial, which was a landmark trial with letrozole we did. And not only that was the first clinical trial which gave me full confidence to do a clinical trial. We had FDA review, we had all sorts of reviews when this drug came into the market. Next. Now, going back to it, do we have predictors what to use for which patient? Should we use chemo or we should use hormone therapy? Next. So we have these 21 gene assay and the 70 gene assay. We have the Great Mind Act trial to tell us how specific are these predictors. Next. And next. So these predictors will definitely help us to predict whether chemotherapy is useful or not. Using the gene expression profile, only 22.5% of patients will be overtreated. Otherwise, you can look at it that over 100 patients in premenopausal patients receiving adjuvant chemotherapy, 83.5 are alive even without chemotherapy, and 13.5 die despite of chemotherapy. So definitely there are predictors, and the gene therapy, the gene assays are useful. But in our country, do you think that just doing the 4 tests like ER, PR, HER2 and Ki67, will it be sufficient enough to predict the therapeutic benefit? Next. Then came the new wave in classification, that is the molecular classification. Next. We all know the molecular portraits of breast cancer based on the HER2 expression, the hormone expression, the proliferative index, and now we have a molecular portrait of the breast cancer depending on various gene expressions. Next. And why these molecular subtypes are important? Because definitely they correlate very well with survival. The luminal A patients do very well, whereas the basal patients do very bad. Next. Next came the way of HER2 era. This also to a certain extent changed the scenario of cancer, breast cancer treatment. Next. So you can see from 1998, from trastuzumab with now going on to pertuzumab, then TDMI, and then neratinib. So in 2000, we have got lot of progress in HER2 therapy, and still I think trastuzumab is as good as all other newer HER2 blocking agents. Next. So trastuzumab in adjuvant setting for patients receiving AC followed by taxane plus trastuzumab, the 5-year rate of disease-free survival was 84% and definitely statistically significant. The overall survival was also very statistically significant. Next. The addition of TDM has had also an impact, but the overall survival was not well demonstrated. Next. There are some more upcoming HER2 targeted therapies because we know that all the HER2 patients usually fail in the brain, and now there are targeted drugs that can cross the blood-brain barrier are being studied, and in FDA's approved the tucatinib combined with trastuzumab and capecitabine for HER2 positive breast cancer. So they live longer without disease progressing, and overall the women receiving only trastuzumab and capecitabine. So this is one drug which has been recently approved. Probably it might benefit patients who already have brain mets. Next. My journey in the use of trastuzumab in our select group of patients, uh, most of my career was spent in Kidwai Memorial Hospital, where only very poor patients, but there was some advantage in Kidwai Memorial because all government sponsored patients used to get, ESI patients used to get, public sector patients used to get. So in one way, they benefit more than the private sector. So we had lot of clinical trials using trastuzumab. So majority of the patients received trastuzumab in the as a part of the clinical trial, and the biosimilar from Biocon, we did that trial also, and many patients, I think I had recruited some 21 patients in that, so almost 21 patients received some sort of trastuzumab. Next. Then I was also a part of this trial, trastuzumab plus a hormone therapy, that is the tandem study, where again we recruited quite a lot of patients, and many patients got trastuzumab free of cost. Next. Now coming to metastatic breast cancer. Next. We have lot of drugs here, microtubule inhibitors, monoclonal antibodies, taxanes, TKI inhibitors, PARP1 inhibitors, anti-estrogens, and anti-metabolites. We have got a variety of drugs. We have to tailor it according to the performance status, according to the metastatic status and previous treatment. Next. Again, there is a controversy in MBC whether we should use sequential or combination. Still, because several studies have come out which says no difference in survival. Next. Then comes the era of personalized medicine. Next. So personalized medicine proffers right medicine at the right dose at the right time to the right patient. That is the theme of personalized medicine. Whether we are able to do that is a big question. Next. So towards the precision in cancer medicine, we have targeted drug, target alterations, sensitizing alterations, then desensitizing alterations, and then tissue-specific modifiers. Finally, we get the response. So all the precision cancer medicine are directed to all these targets. Next. Next. So then comes another new breakthrough is the classification of triple negative breast cancer based on various interactions, which is really confusing, and so many interactions are there. Whether we will be able to target all these interactions is one's guess. Next. Next. So they can be classified as cancers with defective DNA repair, inflamed phenotype, or androgen receptor positive, or PIK altered, or unique antigen expressing, or unclassified. So there are several relevant subgroups of triple negative breast cancer on which various target inhibitors can work. Next. So the current treatment options for metastatic TNBC are the taxanes, anthracyclines, antimetabolites, and other drugs, patients should generally remain on a regimen until best response, disease progression, or significant toxicity. So usually a combination chemotherapy is preferred, and but it usually gives a very good response, but doesn't improve the overall survival. Next. Next. So what are new things happening in triple negative breast cancer is that the new drug which has been approved is very difficult to pronounce, sacituzumab, to treat metastatic triple negative breast cancer, PARP inhibitors, immunotherapy, and androgen receptor blocking agents to prevent androgen production are being tested in a subset of TNBC cancers that express the androgen receptors. Next. Next. Next comes a newer drug, cyclin-dependent kinase inhibitors. Next. Palbociclib is the first in class CDK4 approved in 2015 in combination with letrozole as initial therapy for postmenopausal women in HR positive, HER2 negative advanced or metastatic breast cancer. The progression-free survival with the combination is better than letrozole alone, but there is no significant increase in overall survival. If you look at it, it is only 37.5 versus 34.5% per month. So is it worth spending so much money to add to get only 2 months? Depends on the individual what the patient requires. Next. So hormone therapy plus targeted therapies are now approved in ER-positive breast cancer treatment. Various drugs have been approved, the Ibrance, the Verzenio, or the Piqray, all these have been approved along with hormone therapy. Next. In hereditary advanced breast cancer, PARP inhibitors have definitely helped, is a reasonable option for patients with BRCA-associated triple negative or luminal advanced breast cancer previously treated with an anthracycline or with or without taxane in adjuvant or metastatic setting. Since its use is associated with PFS benefit, improvement in quality of life, and a favorable toxicity profile. Overall survival results are awaited. It is unknown how PARP inhibitors compare with platinum compounds in this setting, and their efficacy is truly seen in platinum-resistant tumors. Next. So my journey from the government setup to Apollo Hospitals, which is a private sector, after 29 years, in 2007, I joined the Apollo Hospital to set up the oncology department. Here what is happening, in view of the cost, I have used in very limited patients all these CDK inhibitors. Whether it is a paradigm shift or just incremental, time only has to tell. Still, I am not very convinced whether the combination of hormone plus CDK inhibitors will be useful, but probably later on we will come to know whether it is having a great impact, whether it's going to be a paradigm shift or only just incremental. Next. So the newer waves in treatment are, we have got for HER2 overexpressing tumors, we have trastuzumab, lapatinib, TDM, pertuzumab. Then for PTEN loss, we have anti-P13K inhibitors. In triple negative, we have platinum salts and PARP inhibitors. In HR hormone receptor positive, we have tamoxifen AI, aromatase inhibitors, fulvestrant. Then in BRCA1, 2 and 1 and 2 mutant tumors, we have PARP inhibitors. So many new waves are there in the treatment of breast cancer. But All these waves, we have to see whether it's going to last and last like tamoxifen or the aromatase inhibitors or taxanes. Next. So the treatment options for various breast cancer type, as on date, there is no specific, no targeted therapy for triple negative breast cancer for more than 10 years. So all others have improved to a great extent the survival, especially the HER2 positive breast cancer and the hormone positive breast cancers. Next. So since 1990s, the progress by many measures has happened. The survivors are growing up. Now, my thought process is now shifting from active treatment. Are we looking at the quality of life of these patients? Next. So I have changed my journey and I have shifted to what is happening to all the unmet needs of all these patients. I leave to all the youngsters to try all the targeted therapies and all newer therapies. Since I've already spent 4 decades, I thought that truly I've never looked at the unmet needs of the patients. So I thought this is the correct time for me to retire and look at the unmet needs of the breast cancer patients. Next. So my journey with unmet needs started with Dr. Sandhya. She has got a setup for patients to give a holistic treatment. So the unmet needs are problems with physical health and activities of daily life, emotional problems and handling stress. Those needs that lack the level of service or support in individual perceives is necessary to achieve optimal well-being. Prevention and management of physical and psychological adverse events, treatment of acute and delayed side effects, body image issues, fatigue, insomnia, cognitive decline, treatment affecting women's health, reproductive health, fertility, sexual health, psychological complications like emotional distress, depression, and anxiety. So these were the unmet needs, and I had really not looked at it during my active practice. So I thought that we should look at these to improve the quality of life of patients. New drugs have come, the survivorship has improved. So this is the time to look at these unmet needs and make the quality of life better. Next. So I looked at all the papers and then found that there are several papers which looked at the unmet needs and supportive care needs. But these supportive care needs, everybody was doing either physical or emotional. So I thought, why not we combine everything and start a holistic program. Next. So we started a multidisciplinary supportive care. We give healthcare information. We have a beautiful open house discussion where the women share all their problems. I mean, I was really surprised. None of these patients have ever spoken to me in a busy outpatient. So many things they came forward in an open house. Then we have a supervised physical exercise. We have emotional counseling. We have yoga, music, and dance therapy. We have cosmesis. We teach the women to go back to their grooming habits. We have lymphedema care too. Next. So our first analysis of our patients, of almost 250 patients, we presented in ESMO recently, and then we got the best poster award from the ESMO. So this has pushed us and gave us great impetus. So we now started what is called the Reboot Your Life program. It's a 12-week program, and all patients are very happy now. I think we have almost put almost 100 patients on the Reboot program. And we have yet to analyze that. But this preliminary analysis was very, very good, and many patients have really come out of their anxiety, depression, and they're happy to dress up, and they are now going back to the society as a woman. Next. So I dedicated the last 40 years of my life chasing a vicious enemy, cancer. Every single day has been a continuing flux between pain and joy. But as you surely know, pain always weighs more heavily than joy. In my daily war against this disease, I've frequently failed, but have occasionally succeeded. The greatest lesson is never to give up. In my professional life, I've always believed that research is the key to the advancement of knowledge and science. Without it, knowledge and the science remain stagnant. Research is in fact the salvation of science. Next. Now, my journey was made possible by my students and patients, Dr. Krishna Bhargava, Dr. Shanta, who really, Dr. Shanta is really my mentor, and I learned quite a lot of things. And I must thank my husband who told me I have to do DM, and my son was only 2.5 years old, and correctly on the DM final exam, he developed chicken pox. He was in Bangalore, and then I had to come back, take him, and Dr. Shanta told me I should not miss the exam. So I took this little fellow, traveled by car, and came back and wrote the exam, and I was successful. So I thank all these people who made my journey possible. My students gave me a lot of input, and I learned quite a lot, and I'm still learning from all my students who are doing very well. And my patients, of course, they have helped me to gain knowledge, improved my knowledge along with patient care. Thank you all for the patient listen.